someone asked me a question the other day. They said, Aaron, I'm looking for a new smartphone, but I've got a seriously tight budget of $200. Should I buy an older flagship smartphone, or should I buy a newer budget smartphone? And I couldn't give them an immediate answer, so I decided to dig a little bit deeper, and let's find out. To find the answer, we've got two of the best smartphones in each category. We've got the Xiaomi Mi5X, which has an alternate version called the Mi A1 running stock Android, but they're more or less the same internally, and that goes for around $200. We've then got the Galaxy Note 3, released at $600, but you can now get a more or less brand new one for $200, and a little bit less if you go pre-owned. We've installed Nova Launcher on both to bring attention to each of the phone's raw capabilities, instead of just the different skins that manufacturers put on top of Android. We'll get on to the power of the two phones in just a bit, which I think is a really interesting battle indeed. But first, the displays. Both are 1920 by 1080p panels, which is pretty good, but you'll instantly recognize the Super AMOLED tech on show with the Samsung. This is a technology that even today tends to be reserved for flagship phones, and there's no denying it makes a world of difference to image quality. The 2013 Note 3 has good viewing angles, and produces beautifully deep colors and inky blacks for some really high levels of contrast. But whilst more recent AMOLED flagships have managed to do this while retaining color accuracy, this was not so much the case in 2013 with the Note 3, which has far too warm a color palette out the box. However, Samsung did let you tinker with this, and regardless, the Note 3 kills the picture quality of the Mi5X. But what about the cameras? Perhaps the most obvious thing you'll notice first is that the Mi5X has a dual camera. The Note 3 does not. Fun fact, we actually saw dual cameras on a phone all the way back in 2011 with the HTC Evo 3D, but at the time they were used to capture 3D images, and it wasn't until 2016 that we really started seeing dual cameras for the purposes of taking better quality images. And that is what we're getting with the Mi5X, so immediately this phone has a bit of a leg up here. It's got a very convincing portrait mode, which uses the dual cameras to perceive depth, and apply huge levels of depth or field or bokeh or blur, whatever you want to call it, to the background, and this truly makes the foreground stand out. The Mi5X can also zoom in whilst barely losing any quality, and that is not the case with the Note 3. Whilst both rear cameras on the 5X are packing a 12 megapixel resolution, the single camera on the Note 3 has 13. So when push comes to shove, the older smartphone here is actually capable of higher levels of detail, but unfortunately it is just so much harder to get photos that look as good. The shutter time is slower, meaning that if you aren't completely steady when you're taking your photo, it's gonna come out blurry. The Mi5X also has better high dynamic range capabilities and a wider angle, which lets you capture more of your scene. Both phones shoot 4K video, and in this category too, the 5X has a slight edge in terms of dynamic range and noise. To be honest, the Xiaomi is about as good as $200 phone cameras get in 2018, and in this case you can quite clearly see that cameras are an area where newer is better. But what about power, which I think is a particularly interesting area because back in 2013 when the Note 3 was released, it was the most powerful phone in the world. Whereas when it was released in 2017, the Xiaomi Mi5X was definitely not. The Note 3 had the Snapdragon 800, a flagship system on a chip from 2013, and the Xiaomi has the Snapdragon 625, which in 2018 is pretty mid-range. Okay, I'm about to get a little bit technical here, but hopefully this will make sense. So the Snapdragon 800 is based off a 28nm fabrication process. The 625 is based off 14. So what has happened between these two chips is known as a die shrink, and is essentially a situation in which an identical circuit has been created, but one that exists in a smaller area. This huge shrink in die size not only reduces the current that is needed by each transistor, making a product with a lower total power consumption, but also it allows more chips to be crammed onto the same wafer, which reduces costs and allows more powerful chips to come to cheaper phones. And this is, much to the detriment of the Samsung, exactly what has happened here. The Mi5X is more responsive, scores higher on benchmarks, and is far more capable in terms of gaming. This is a perfect example of how processing power is moving forward rapidly. A few years is enough to make a transformative difference to how the phone feels. One more thing that you really have to bear in mind if you're going down the Android route is that with an older phone, you're missing out on up-to-date software. Even the top-tier flagship phones, they tend to remain up to date for 2 years at the very maximum, and even though budget phones are even less likely to get these updates, if you're buying a recent one like the Mi5X or the Mi A1, you've got a bit of a head start. Compared to the Android 5.0 on the Note, the Xiaomi enjoys things like Android Pay, support for USB Type-C and faster data transfers, better multitasking, and so much more. It's just a richer mobile experience. So of course, there are tons of other factors that we could try and compare between these two phones, such as build quality, speakers, battery capacity, but these all vary wildly from phone to phone, and they're not characteristics that have really trended upwards or downwards. They're not necessarily things that have gotten better or worse over time. The key areas of improvement buying a modern budget phone as opposed to an older flagship are probably going to be seen in terms of camera, processing power, efficiency, as well as the software experience. But this video is an example of how you might actually get a better quality display if you go for an older flagship. All things considered then, the modern budget smartphone seems to be a more compelling option. So if budget is an issue, then a $200 phone from 2017 or 2018 seems like a good sweet spot. I wouldn't go much cheaper as you start to make some serious compromises, and the yields from going more expensive, while noticeable, are definitely diminishing. Thanks a lot for watching, guys. I really do hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, it would mean a lot to me if you could smash that subscribe button. My name is Aaron, this is Mr. Who's the Boss, and I'm signing out.